It's one of the biggest thorns in my side to hear that if I have a coach get in front of your formation once or twice a week for 1 hour, have somehow like ruined the leadership development of one or two soldiers in that unit. Like leading PRT does not develop leadership. It doesn't.
Team, welcome back to the Mops and Mo's podcast. Joining us tonight is Alex.
Special
Welcome.
guest host.
Yeah, special guest Alex. Episode, I don't know, 872. Disclaimer, I make those numbers up. That's not the real
We don't really
episode
know
number.
what number episode this is.
We don't know what we're on, but I say that because I've run into some people, and if one of them is listening, he may know this, that actually thought that that was the number of episodes we were on. It's not. We
We
don't
are
know
we
how
are
many we've
somewhere
done.
between 100 and 200.
I was expecting a tighter shot group there, but that
No, I
was
don't have a. I mean,
okay. More than one.
it's probably not 150 yet. I don't know. Maybe, could be. Who knows?
We'll see. But current events, you're not allowed to have poppy seeds anymore if you're in the military.
Yeah. This one's a little bit annoying and frustrating, and I will actually like turn this into a useful announcement, I think, at the end because there's something related here. But official in policy now, don't need so many poppy seeds so you don't fail your drug test. Now, I have my doubts, first of all, that anybody is actually pissing hot on your analyses because of too many poppy seeds.
What's how many poppy seeds would you have to eat? Do you know?
I don't know. Any toxicologists listen to us or whatever, people who do your analyses, whatever. I have no idea. If you're out there, can you get us a number for like how many poppy seeds in a day you would have to consume? That'd be super interesting to know. I feel like this is just people who like managed to lawyer their way out of a positive urinalysis
Well done, them.
by like introducing enough doubt around poppy seed consumption. I don't know. Me personally, I take it as a challenge. I'm going to eat as many poppy seeds as I can and hopefully piss hot because that would be a super fun lawsuit situation.
I'm trying to find just a quick Google to see how many
Well,
50 grams. Up to 50 grams, it looks like. I have no idea how many
so
poppy seeds that is.
1/20th of a kilogram, right?
Uh,
Is that a lot? That seems like a lot.
50 grams seems like a lot. Poppy seeds are pretty small.
Yeah.
Anyway,
How many, can you Google how many poppy seeds in 50 grams? AI should be able to do that one for you.
you can buy a 50-gram bag of poppy seeds for,
So you have to eat a whole bag of poppy seeds.
well, a 50-gram bag from Geomart. I don't know. That looks
Let's
foreign.
let's turn this one into an actual useful but still drug related warning.
Sure.
I have heard from multiple sources with each of which had good placement and access that coming very soon, SOCOM will be doing regular, not for cause performance enhancing drug tests. I would guess that this is likely part of the ramifications from the Bud's death a long time
Oh,
ago.
for sure.
Um, but if you're out there and you're in SOCOM and you're using PEDs because you can only get caught if there's a for cause urinalysis, that might be changing. They might be doing random PED testing across SOCOM. So,
We'll
yeah.
keep you updated with the latest here on Mops and Mo's. Who are we talking to today? I was going to say drugs, but that has absolutely nothing to do with Ray.
No, there's not even a mention of drugs in this episode. We're doing, I say this too many times, we're doing a long overdue episode.
You
I've been
say that
going back
every
and
time.
forth. I mean, there's a few guests that I've talked to about coming on for a long time, and we
That's
just take
fair.
a long time to make it happen. And Ray is one of them. We've been talking about needing some Marine Corps representation on the podcast. Ray checks that box. He was a Marine. But more importantly, every time I'm like posting about something interesting on Mops and Mo's, Ray has some really insightful feedback. So he'll send me a message. It'll be really valuable. I'll reply immediately. We got to get you on the podcast. And we just play this game where we send messages like that back and forth for like a year and a half or something. Now we finally got him on the podcast. So Ray Cossio, 12-year veteran of the Marine Corps, served as an infantry squad leader, platoon sergeant, and martial arts instructor. During his time in service, he deployed to Afghanistan in 2005, participated in Operation Red Wings, Iraq in 2006 during the surge, and then again to Afghanistan in 2011 to the Helmand Province. He was awarded combat action ribbons, 3 Navy and Marine Corps achievement medals, and a Bronze Star with V for valor. Following his time in the Marine Corps, he received his bachelor's degree in exercise science from the University of Houston, where he participated in internships with their sports performance, as well as Texas Obesity Research Clinic. He then went on to earn his master's degree in kinesiology from the University of Texas, conducted research on e-cigarettes' effects on blood vessels, and was a member of the Cardiovascular and Aging Laboratory. So if you're a big vapor, ask Ray about how it's affecting your blood vessels. His professional experience includes roles such as coach, programmer, and operations manager for private gyms in Austin and Houston, Texas. In 2018, he began working as a contracted strength and conditioning coach for the Army's H-2F pilot, where he had the privilege of working with 40th Brigade Engineer Battalion, 237 Armor, and the 1st Armored Division Sustainment Brigade. Following his time as a contracted coach, Ray was hired in 2021 as the 11th Air Defense Artillery Brigade's H-2F program director, and he is still in that role today.
And that program is crushing it.
Doing good things.
Yeah. So as you just said, folks may not have picked up on this, but Ray's been with H2F literally since the beginning, as a strength coach and now as a program director. So there are slants in the conversation towards commentary on H2F, but more broadly, I think Ray is one of those guests. And talk about phrases we use a lot, cerebral strength coach. Probably use that a lot, but Ray undoubtedly fits the bill in terms of that title. So I think a lot to be said about his role in sort of the martial arts space, certainly his role as a Marine, but now his role as a program director. Just a really interesting perspective on how this whole thing is going in terms of embedded human performance.
Couple good hot takes too. We
Some
always
hot
appreciate
takes.
some hot takes for the
Yeah,
pod.
some hot takes. Thanks, Ray, for the hot takes. But yeah, enjoy.
Many of our episodes don't necessarily have a plan when we get going. This one has even less of a plan than that. This is just because every time you and I have talked, Ray, like immediately I think, and you've seen this in like messages I've sent you, I've been like, man, not only is that a good point, but it is something we should talk about in the podcast at some point. And that's been happening for like 2 years or something now, maybe 3 years now that we've like randomly exchanged messages every couple months. We're like, man, like why haven't we talked about that yet? So this is a very overdue chat about a bunch of topics that probably have nothing to do with each other.
That sounds good. No, I definitely feel the same way. Like, I think when you post something on Instagram, and I'm like, man, I'm not a comment person, but like I'm like, oh, I got to drop something in there. Just something in there.
Alex loves a comment.
I do. It's always good. Well, right now lately I'm swamped. I posted the other day about how like I'm fully a week behind on answering messages. I just can't keep up right now. Maybe in like a week I'll catch up. So if there are people out there, they're like, I've sent you good ideas too, and you're not responding to them. I'm sorry. I'll get there one day. Maybe, maybe not. I
We
don't
should
know.
start a good idea fairies club for like genuine, actually good ideas. And Ray could be sort of like member number one of the good idea fairies.
Oh man.
As a compliment, not as an insult.
Well, we got some we're going to get to, but I think I have to ask one to open this up because we have people have pointed out before that we don't necessarily have the best joint representation on this podcast. There's been a lot of Army, a little bit of Air Force, and not much other than that. So, Ray, although you work with the Army now, your background is as a Marine Corps CO. I'd love just to hear because we hear about like the physical culture in the Marine Corps, the fitness culture in the Marine Corps. I'd love to hear what your experience has been coming from being an NCO in the Marine Corps to being a coach and like a leader of human performance programs in the Army.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the lowest ranked Marine that you just had Sergeant Major Black on. So it's probably a big hitter for the Marine Corps. Um, I think that's where it starts, right? When we think about it starts with culture, and it's almost like the first thing that they even talk about when in like Marine Corps commercials, right? It's like you're not an individual anymore. Um, and I think we just value physicality like straight off the bat. And it's not even so much an everyday thing. It's like, hey, are you the best warrior? I think I really enjoyed like Larson's conversation that you guys had with him, talking about just like warrior culture. Like that's it. And I don't know how to describe it other than it's just packaged to us so well when we leave boot camp and you're like, hey, you are a Marine. You are every Marine is a rifleman. You are the greatest warrior on this planet, right? And it starts with that, and then we all like leave boot camp thinking that, and then people probably get their butt kicked while they're in downtown Oceanside or San Diego, because you literally think that, but then you start to value those things, and it's not so much valuing physical fitness, which is a component of it, but you start to value like marksmanship scores. You start to value, yeah, how well you did on the PFT, but also value how well you did during a range. Like, man, I really crushed it in that range. I did everything. No, my NCO didn't yell at me. Um, so I think it kind of just starts along those lines. But I knew you were going to kind of throw that at me, and I was kind of thinking of like a good example, and it's also probably a really bad example. But I'm going to say it anyways because it's like 20 plus years since it happened. You know, one thing that we do as an infantry guy or infantry Marines is like there's this unwritten rule like, hey, your rifle's not more than one hand's arm's distance away. So we were young Marines up in Hawaii in the Kahukus, and I have a good friend of mine, Donovan, and I'm going to give you his nickname because I think it's hilarious. It's Double Dessert Donovan, because he would always get two desserts when we went to the chow hall. Um, so he's messing with the rifle, touches the rifle. I go, hey, don't touch the rifle again. Um, and he kind of just touches the rifle again. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? So I proceed to stand up, tackle him, and we roll down the hill. We're rolling down the hill. Like, I don't know how to ground fight at this point. I'm just trying to smash him. I end up on top of him. He's wearing a camelback. And the only thing I could think to do was like grab the camelback hose and wrap it around his neck. So our senior Marines come down, they break us up. And then following that, I was rewarded. He was punished, right? And so the reward was I didn't have to stand fire watch that night. His reward, his punishment was he did have to stand fire watch. And so like that's just like a very like small snapshot, but you start to value certain things based off certain experiences that you have. And I know that's kind of like that's not where the military is nowadays, and I'm definitely not saying that, but you have to start that in the beginning and value those things right off the bat for you know a certain culture to kind of be cultivated.
I do worry about that sometimes because you said you had that quick line in there about that's not where the military's at right now. And I think a lot of things are like a pendulum effect where we go too far one direction and then we swing too far the other direction, and the right answer was somewhere in the middle. And yes, it's going to be different. Like a signal battalion is going to be different than an infantry battalion, is going to be different than a sustainment unit, like all that kind of stuff. But there is a certain amount of like deliberately fostering aggression that's probably appropriate. And I chose that word. I didn't choose that word. Shout out JD Mata had a great post on it recently about Air Force Special Warfare. And they had a bunch of civilians that were working with these special warfare candidates who were like, why are they always angry? And JD's point was that's not necessarily anger. They're not angry at anyone. They're just aggressive. And you got to get used to that because it's an important part of the culture. And if you like lose that, you lose something important about the organization. I don't know. I don't know if that's going anywhere. It's probably outside the scope of mops and mo's, but there's a culture conversation there that's important.
I think you know I read it this morning. I totally agree because you you know when you did the Larson podcast, I was a Marine Corps martial arts instructor trainer. Like I went through McMap, I went through the instructor trainer course in Quantico, um, and then like that course, right, really kind of exemplifies like being physically fit, but also having the the desire to be like a combatant. But I remember like after that course, and I would be teaching instructor courses down in San Diego, and nobody would ever talk to me. Like none of the students would ever talk to me. They talked to my buddies who were instructors as well. And then I was just kind of like, how come they don't talk to me? And it was just more along the lines. I remember just some anecdote. Like I remember somebody saying like, I don't want to talk to him because he always walks with his fists clenched and he's walking way too fast and he's always got a serious face on him. Um, and so like I kind of like I related to that to Mata's post on that. But why wouldn't she be like that, right? Like it's the military. There's only one mission for the army, there's only one mission for the military.
I have to ask, what is your favorite Marine Corps recruiting commercial? There is a right answer to this, by the way. It involves
It's
a dragon.
yes, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
There you go. I knew it.
Maybe you incepted that because I maybe just heard it you talked about it at some point.
There's a sword and a dragon.
There was a pretty good one recently where it was like the it was like black clay on top of like a bunch of battles.
Interesting. I
It's
think
really
we've mentioned, man, I could not figure the episode off the top of my head, but I think we talked about this and then we compared it to
We have
The Navy SEAL one where it's like the beach and then there's
with the
footsteps.
prince. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I do want to ask you, just specific to the Marine Corps, and in fairness, I don't know much about where they're at with human performance. You may know more than I do, but in your opinion, is there a risk associated with creating that level of cultural buy-in at such an early phase? And then you kind of get into your unit, you sort of get into the mix. Is there a resistance to new ideas because there's this just belief that, hey, we're the best, we've got everything figured out, it's all good? I ask that because I've sort of heard that anecdotally when it comes to culture change that happens to be associated with embedding, in some sense, civilians as human performance professionals. And I'm just curious where the Marine Corps is at with that, given that they seem to enjoy doing more with less.
yeah, I think uh I don't know if you guys know Paul Lopez, a good friend of mine, went to grad school together, was also a Marine. So we clicked like really, really fast. But we would always joke like Marines are never gonna do this. Like we were like, there's too much pride in the organization.
Exactly.
Um, but when I look down at my experience, it's it's funny because I almost don't say that I'm a Marine around certain circles in the army because I feel like it's automatically going to turn people off. Like it's just something like, or somebody's going to say that I like crayons. Purple is the best, by the way. So like it always comes down to that. But I got to tell you, like in my personal experiences, like if you think about, I went to infantry squad leaders course. Um, we don't have ranger school, but like when you become a squad leader, going to infantry squad leaders course is kind of like the pinnacle of like, hey, your unit cares about you, and it's going to be 2 months of getting your butt kicked and getting treated like you don't know anything because you really don't know anything to that point. And one of the books that you have to buy as associated with that is the Ranger Handbook. Because at the end of the day, what Marines do is soldiering. We just do it in as a maritime force. And who are the best soldiers that we kind of pick from? Well, why wouldn't we use some like another force's handbook if they do it really, really well, right? So we use the Ranger Handbook. When I was an instructor, as a martial arts instructor, we would bring on civilians to be like subject matter experts to kind of teach guest courses and guest classes. And one of my longest mentors is Jeff Anderson, who was 82nd Airborne, retired Riverside Sheriff's deputy. And he would come down. He was a soldier, and he would come down and hang out with a bunch of Marines and teach us how to fight and teach us about knife skills. And none of us were like ever closed minded to that. So I th- I think as an organization, it would be very hard to like get somebody like the commandant to be like, "Hey, we're going to bring in civilians." But I think that there's an openness to that. Even in the martial arts instructor trainer course at Quantico, like the black belt course, um, we would have like civilian experts come in and like teach us Muay Thai or teach us, and everybody was super open to it. So I think that there's room for it. I think we would be open to it. I would like to think that I would be a humble enough NCO to be like, hey, coach, write whatever you want. My guys will be here and we're gonna execute it because I got way too much on my hands.
As you say that, a question just came to my mind, and I'd be curious if you have a thought on it. Because I'm thinking now about situations like that, Marine Corps martial arts. I'm assuming other branches of the military, obviously with their own martial arts program, as you ascend in the kind of belts, you do turn over quite a bit of that to civilians. I'm also thinking of like marksmanship courses that are typically run by civilians. It seems like there is a subset of skill acquisition where the military is completely open to handing that over to civilian experts. Mountaineering is another one comes to mind. Why do we think that fitness is something that they seem really weird in terms of handing over to civilians? I literally just came to my mind and I'm throwing it out there so we can dissect it.
Honestly, I don't think that it's a military thing. I think that in general, what strength and conditioning coaches do to the most people seems very elementary and very simple. Isn't until you start talking to them and then you start really telling them, like, look, I'm a strength coach. I'm not a personal trainer. There's some amazing personal trainers. I'm not knocking personal trainers. But like I didn't just graduate high school and I didn't just start working at, insert gym. And I'm not like going onto bodybuilding.com and just pulling a workout routine, right? I'm trying to reverse engineer what that end goal is for that individual in a program. And that requires knowledge of physiology, biomechanics, and so many other things. And I've said it to multiple people, like, I really do think like strength and conditioning, we're like almost like the bastard child of like all the like physical modality, like physical therapy, occupational therapy, like it's like even like like RDs, like we're kind of viewed below that. It may be like the certification. It may be that we don't have a board certification type thing. And I know
Mhm.
I kind of view it like it just kind of it seems simple. I mean, it's kind of like where I was kind of like interested when I was getting out of the Marine Corps. I was like, oh, I could do that. No, like for sure.
I like working out. I'm gonna be a strength coach.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things running through my head. One is I think part of that problem stems from like the historical disrespect for physical education in this country. Like that's always like looked down upon among teachers and stuff like that. I don't think that's a rabbit hole we're going to go down this episode. Needless to say, I think most of us here would say that we should invest in that more, and you can see the results of not caring about it across our country. But what you guys got me thinking about is you were going back and forth about openness to outside experts. I might be wrong here, but a perception I have had is that the more elite organizations are, the more they are open to not being the experts and learning from outside experts. The the more like gen pop, like conventional military you get, the more they insist that we are the experts and we don't need
That's
outside people.
it's your Dunning-Kruger curve right there.
It's a
I
little
was
bit of
about to say
Dunning-Kruger
that.
stuff, and it's a
I
little bit
think,
like if you have to say you're an expert,
oh, for
I
sure,
have
dude.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the quote? If you're good, you'll tell everyone. If you're great, they'll tell you. That kind of thing. I
Yeah,
don't know.
man.
I'm just throwing out like Disney quotes, but it's
Because
very
I mean,
true.
like elite special operations units are constantly getting outside consultants on everything to include fitness. Like, and we just not to like go down a totally different sidebar that we'll probably do a podcast episode on a different time, but we saw what happened at Tufts a week ago with a Navy SEAL guy giving a bunch of kids rhabdo. Like, just because you're at a high level in terms of your performance and what you do doesn't mean you can't learn relevant things that support your performance from people who are experts at what they do. I don't know.
No, I agree. I think, you know, I was going to say Dunning-Kruger. It's you just start to learn more things. I once I graduated with my BS, I had been coaching. Like I have a little similar background like Drew has. Like started coaching. Like I was I was doing my internship. I did like 8 months of my internship at U of H, and then I went and got a job at a CrossFit gym, and that's
Hell
really where my
yeah.
application began, right? But when I started coaching at the CrossFit gym, I was a Marine. I just did 8 months of an internship where I worked 70 hours a week. I was getting my BS in exercise science. Like I knew everything. Like you come to me, I know I'm the expert coach. And then you kind of learn things, go get your master's degree. You're in your master's degree and you're like, everybody's smart here. And I actually don't know anything. Um, and then you start to realize like, okay, like I really need to kind of step back and listen more than I do like talk.
Hmm.
Mhm.
nothing going back to like not having a plan for this episode. Nothing we've talked about so far is anything we had planned to talk about necessarily. But I want to get to one thing that I was curious to talk to you
We're
about.
we're we're doing jazz music, I think is a way of
Exactly,
we're making
improvising.
jazz.
Um, you had posted something I thought was interesting, or maybe this was in a DM you sent me or something like that. But a conversation about like I think there's a lot of words the military misuses all the time. I think readiness is one of them, but we'll put that one aside for a second and talk about the second most misused one, which is lethality. And we've talked about fitness stuff here. You've talked about combative stuff here, knife skills stuff here. I would love to hear what you think lethality is and what role fitness plays within that.
I'll do this. I'll do this for Drew. Like
Thank you. Go crazy.
running a 600 ACFT doesn't make you lethal, right? It can enhance your lethality if you know how to be lethal. And that's just like my personal opinion, right? Like I can think of some of the hardest nosed Marines that I've deployed with who were not the highest fitness guys or who even like to run. But I'm pretty sure I saw a Marine in Afghanistan knock down a wall just by charging into it and creating cover for us.
Was it double dessert?
No, it wasn't. This is
Mm,
this is like third
that
deployment.
would have been very circuitous.
Big dude. No, double dessert was actually kind of small. We were just mean.
Of course.
But yeah, I think and I've had conversations with coaches and where we're really like, if you think about sports, we play a very small strength and conditioning coaches play a very small role in that sport. And the majority of your time, if you're trying to get better at a sport, is playing that sport. If you're trying to get better at soldiering, or if you're trying to get better at being an infantryman, the majority of your time spent and your efforts spent should be in soldiering tasks. The Then you can put some PRT into that, and now you're enhancing that lethality. Now, like, hey, everybody can shoot expert now. Everybody can read a compass and navigate through the forest. Everybody can like do whatever, insert skill of an infantryman. Oh, but now we're going to start training. And let's say I can get my entire, I'm a big fan of, I don't know if you guys ever read Gates of Fire,
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
Stephen
Pressfield.
Pressfield. Stephen
Hmm.
Pressfield's man, like every book, I just cannot stop. But like in the Marine Corps, we talk a lot about martial cultures, and the Spartans is like kind of the first thing you talk about in the martial arts instructor course. And like it's interesting, right? If you there's an old there was an old show where they kind of, do you guys remember it? They took people from like the best warriors from different ages, and then they like simulated
Yeah, like simulate them fighting each other. That was Discovery
Oh
Channel, I think.
yeah. I remember that.
and they took like a Spartan, and they're like, and they had a conversation about it, and they're like in reality, if you just took one Spartan and you kind of put them against maybe like a samurai or something, like there's it probably wouldn't be all that effective for
Hmm.
somebody who just knows how to like push and thrust, right? But as a unit and everybody's on the same page, like that changes the game, right? So when I think about fitness and when I think about ACFT scores or when I think about CFT scores in the Marine Corps, like if everybody can just be in that higher percentile, then we have a really amazing and lethal team. But if we only have like a few people hitting 600s and then the majority, like the average person in the unit's hitting like 480 or something, right? There's a big disparity. Um, so yeah, I view sometimes I think we view PRT as a band-aid for things, and physical readiness is not a band-aid for certain things, right? It enhances our abilities.
So you got me thinking about something that floats through my brain every few weeks as we talk about like
Wait, actually,
the
before you ask this
difference.
question, can I ask, was Gates of Fire on your first lieutenant reading list?
I don't think it was. I don't
No,
think it was. Drew's going to continually make fun of me for this list, like
Alex,
every
as a young
episode.
leader, had his own reading list for his
Again,
soldiers to.
I was trying to get people days off. That's all it was.
I
Anyway,
I don't worry about it, Alex. My last squad, I made all of them buy Gates of Fire and read it before our
there we
deployment.
go. The only book I made my whole platoon read was Tribe by Sebastian Younger. That was the only time I like made it a thing other than
That's fair.
voluntary.
I commend you for that. That's a good book.
Getting back to my question, Drew.
Carry on.
Um, there's constantly conversations about whether tactical parallels sport strength and conditioning and like what ways it's similar and what ways it's different. And one of the ones I worry about a lot is that if you're a coach in a sports setting, you can assume that a lot of the conditioning comes from practicing the sport. Like you're just going to have to be doing it a lot because you practice a lot because that's the team you're on. And I think that's a mildly safe assumption in some combat arms units. Like if you're in an infantry squad, infantry platoon, something like that, you're probably getting a fair amount of time just like on your feet under load, just doing infantryman stuff separate from physical training. But I think as soon as you get like remotely outside that, even if you're just in like a different battalion within an infantry brigade, you might not get that much time doing soldiery stuff. And so they try to make up for that by turning PT into soldiery stuff. And that's where the combat PT Thursdays come from. And that's where the no walking during PT, you always have to run everywhere you go thing comes from. And I worry that we've messed up by like conflating practice with strength and conditioning because a lot of parts of the military just don't do enough practice. And I know that was a statement, not a question, but I'd love, I mean, you're with air defense artillery now, right? So like you probably see some of this.
Yeah, I think that my experience as a Marine was I talk about this all the time with the coaches and my team and people around me is like I can remember only a few times where we had morning PRT more than 3 days a week, right?
Hmm.
We very rarely had, and I can count on my fingers how many people failed our conditioning tests in a battalion, like maybe two or three ever failed at a time. Um, but I also think that there's value if you're bringing in experts, there's value in like, hey, let's use these experts every day. So I think it's just accepting like, hey, we need to create a novel structure for this. And I think hopefully this kind of gets it getting because I've been wanting to like when you think about training, right? You think about training in a week. Most people think about like that microcycle in a week. So I got to do everything that I did last week and this week, and everything I did last week again this week. And I think that lends itself to overtraining within the military context because it's just nonstop. Like you said, when you think about just numbers and like having to break down, like, hey, I only have this many experts, this many soldiers, and now I have this logistical nightmare of how do I get this organized? Well, the easiest thing that we did, well, I didn't do it. This is a shout out to Coach David. Um, he's like, well, let's just expand the rotation, right? Why don't we just expand the rotation? And we're working on a 2 week microcycle. And a lot of people have talked about this. This is not like a novel concept. But now, like any one unit is rotating through 7 days, and each one of those days has a different mission or a different goal. And you're getting that good concurrent training. And I think by doing that, we're not thrashing the soldiers every day. Um, but I see value in it, especially in the organization that I work for, is like I see value in training every day. Because some of those jobs, some of those MOSs, like they don't have a choice. They're going to get stuck in front of the computer all day. Like this is your time to make money with them.
I'd like to hold your hand real quick as we bash the NSCA together because when we think about, I know it's not called TSAC anymore, but like effectively that curriculum, that textbook is the same thing as the essentials NSCA textbook. They just changed athlete to soldier or firefighter, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And what you just mentioned was interesting because here we have a coach who recognized the problem, came up with an innovative solution. My question is like, are we getting to the point where the folks on the ground are making enough noise to almost demand a sort of rewrite of what it truly means to be a tactical strength and conditioning coach? And instead of just repackaging sports training, we should probably look at putting some people together and literally from the ground up rebuilding tactical strength and conditioning. Because it seems like, I mean, hearing that from you, we've heard it from plenty of other guests, plenty of other coaches who haven't even come on. Clearly, this is an entirely different problem set. And there's some carryover, like squatting heavy is always going to make you better at squatting heavy. That's fine. But I don't really see anywhere in the traditional literature that would encourage a young coach to think outside of a 1 week microcycle. So I turn that over to you to go crazy.
Yeah, no, I would I agree that strength and conditioning is not so clear cut, right? There's no there's there's an idea of like, well, we're gonna like build, we're gonna then do a peak, and then we're gonna do. I'm like, oh, so have you looked at the long range training calendar this week or next month or like so there's a fallacy definitely in the idea that I can do the same thing every week and make progress, especially with the amount of things going on and just kind of like the dynamic nature of military life. And so, I think that we I think there's an opportunity. And what I've seen though, and to back those coaches up is sometimes you just got to experiment and move forward, move the needle forward. But I mean, I think there's an opportunity to definitely get some thoughts on paper and be like, hey, like this is this is a better way about going through things for a tactical population because I think it pigeonholes us, right? When you say you open up that textbook and it's like this is how you're going to train, and the only exercises in the textbook are barbell exercises, automatically it's like we need gyms, we need
Hmm.
gyms, and now you just create like this logistical nightmare of like, how do I get gyms? Where's the funding coming from? Like, and you're just pulling your hair, and it's like, all right, let's think outside the box. We don't need a squat today. We don't need a squat. I just had a conversation and like I had like coaches like blowing their like blood vessels and just kind of like thinking, but then we like sat down. And I'm like, all right, so like, I mean, I've been watching little like reels where they're clipping Buddy Morris. And he's like, ah, why am I gonna squat my big guys? I'm just gonna have them push a heavy sled. I'm like, okay, so I'm not wrong in thinking like, do we need a squat, right? So like, I mean, you give me a call through and we can start working on something like that.
It's just interesting because I mean, even just today, I was on a phone call with some like, I mean, relatively senior leader types, and they're very excited about the, new facilities and brick and mortar and all this. And it's like, and none of this is bad. I should preface this by saying none of this is bad. It's just more of a thought experiment where there's a big push, it seems, in the military to almost recreate collegiate and professional strength and conditioning, which again, there's goodness in that. I mean, we've seen an abundance of resources put out to units. Everybody has access to gym in boxes and all this sort of thing. But I sense a lot of friction between experts coming in. We've talked about civilian experts sort of coming in and saying, hey, this needs to look like football. And then senior leaders saying, hey, this needs to look like football because those guys are saying it should look like football. And then everybody in the middle being like, well, shit, we can't really make it look like football. This must not be working. Let's just forget about what he says and go run on Thursday. And I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm just throwing it out there because I think it is interesting when you think about the fact that maybe we haven't taken the time to take a step back and truly investigate like, okay, we're right at the cusp of a massive rollout of embedded civilians, active duty, whatever. Like we're literally changing the face of military human performance right now for the next 10 years. Maybe we should examine what that should look like as opposed to trying to recreate Oregon, Alabama, Georgia. Maybe I've made some enemies there, but I'm with you. And that like maybe you don't have to back squat. Like, just a thought.
I just kind of view it. I've been at it since 2018, right? I've been at this particular um, human performance program since 2018. And when I came on, and this is when I was a strength coach, so I'm going to talk about it freely because I'm not contracting anymore. And
Go
there's
crazy, man.
uh, I was told that I was going in and everybody was going to know who I was and they're ready to work and you're going to have your equipment. And I showed up and I was like, just kind of walking into like different Bay areas, like anybody here? I finally found somebody and they're like, what's up? I'm like, I'm the new strength coach. Oh, they didn't know. They pointed me in the direction of physical therapist. Um, and she was amazing. She helped us out. She helped build this program out of nothing. But our literal the equipment that I had to work with was Bradley road wheels, just the inside wheel, and we threw chains on there. And then my buddy, who I met on the job, like I'd never met this guy in my life. He was just coming from Texas Tech. Um, and then we're like, well, what are we gonna do? We're just gonna sit down. Like, how are we gonna train them? And we ended up getting a rotation. Like we had six batteries, or I'm sorry, six companies for that battalion. And we're like, hey, Monday you're coming, Tuesday you're coming, Wednesday you're coming. And all we did was drag these sleds up and down this field for like 40 minutes. Everybody got like 8 or 10 reps in, right? And that's all we did for like 2 months because we didn't have anything. And then we ended up getting tow bars. And we're like, cool, these are our landmines. All right, here we go. We're tow barring and landmine squatting. And then we got more chains, and those became our battle ropes, which were really dangerous.
I was gonna say.
But amazing, like amazing workout. Um, and like I mean, shout out to Travis Nelson if you don't know who he is, like he and I would just come in, we'd show up at 5:30 in the morning, freezing our butts off. I know everybody thinks El Paso is super warm, but in the winter, it gets to like 20 degrees. It's like 120 degrees in the summer and 20 degrees in the winter. That's a big fluctuation. So like I cherish those moments because we got the most work and I feel like soldiers really enjoyed that more than I'm going to go into the gym and I'm going to have to learn how to squat. And maybe I'm afraid, or maybe I don't want to learn how to squat. If we're trying to jump over that first hurdle, and that first hurdle is culture change, I think like dropping just gyms everywhere isn't really that answer. I think we should think novelly.
It's interesting, and I know, Alex, I'm going to turn this back over to you eventually, but as he just said that, because we've been guilty of this too. We talk about culture change a lot, and it's always from the context of the military needs to change the culture. There's something to be said where I think tactical human performance needs a, or not even tactical, just human performance needs a culture change too. I think it goes both ways. So yeah, now I will now turn the mic back over to you because I know I keep interrupting.
Now, between the two of you, you've set up what I wanted to talk about really well because we talked about the difference between sport strength and conditioning and tactical strength and conditioning. And I want to cut straight to something that Ray and I have talked about before, both on the job and in the DMs and things like that, that is at the heart of kind of the difference between tactical and like collegiate or pro sport or something like that. And that is that in a sports setting, coaches coach, right? Athletes come in, coaches tell them movements, sets, reps, rest. They watch them, they cue them, they do their thing, and then they leave the weight room and go do whatever else they do. In tactical, or at least in the army setting, but definitely in a lot of tactical places, there's this tension where it like for certain leaders and in certain places, it feels like if we let coaches coach, we are abdicating junior leaders' responsibility to lead physical training. And it's seen as a core part of how junior leaders develop as leaders, and it's seen as a core part of team building and all of these things. So, Ray, I'm curious on your perspective on the whole battle of like, should coaches coach? Should coaches teach NCOs to coach? Should there be some of both? Like, what is the answer to that? Because that it comes up so often, and nobody seems to have a conclusive answer to how it's supposed to work.
It's one of the biggest thorns in my side to hear that if I have a coach get in front of your formation once or twice a week for 1 hour, have somehow like ruined the leadership development of one or two soldiers in that unit. Like leading PRT does not develop leadership. It doesn't. It
Or
may
the
be,
episode right there.
I was gonna say,
it
there's
may
your
be,
soundbite.
yeah, maybe like it maybe develops really great public speaking. Like if you're afraid of public speaking, get out there and coach, right? But like it's not going to develop your lead. I did not learn to lead by leading PRT. I can even count on my hands when they made me get in front of a battery like or a company to lead like the daily 15 that we used to have. And that was like twice. And I didn't learn how to lead doing that. Like I read a script. I was like, okay, I got to do this, and then like embarrassed myself trying to like open ranks. And then went through the daily 15. I learned how to lead by having really great mentors who took the time to tell me, like, this is what you should do. You should counsel your Marines like once a week, or you should talk to them. You should, pay them visits, find out who they are, find out what they like to do. Like that's where you learn to lead and you build it kind of builds your empathy. And then um, you know, when we think about getting in front of a formation, you ask for coaches to come to this unit. A coach is like the power of a coach is getting in front of a group of athletes and like coaching them up, right? Showing their expertise, managing the time. Like maybe you got three groups and everything is running like a well-oiled machine. Like that's the power of a coach. And to me, if you can get soldiers or young PRT leaders in front of a coach and they can see how a professional does it, that's money for your organization. Like, okay, we're taking 1 hour out of the week from you, but we're showing you how a professional executes. And then hopefully that trickles into, hey, I remember coach was doing this and this is how he organized it. And now you're kind of getting that development of PRT leaders. But yeah, man, like it's not going to do anything to you. And the coaches are going to be happy if you give them 1 or 2 days, because Drew and I didn't get into coaching because we wanted just to oversee things. Like I got into coaching because I wanted to be in there. I love coaching so much that I coach middle schoolers on the side so that I still get that little bit of coaching and that little bit of frustration with athletes. And, like that's what I love to do as a coach. I wish that the coaching paid more and I could be a coach forever, but
Well, this is a question for both of you, having been active duty before, because we've had some pretty senior folks come on here and say the exact opposite of what you just said. And they may be listening right now and be like, damn it, Ray, PRT is important for leadership development. Like, what is it? What is the core of that argument? I say that because I don't know. I'm genuinely, is that something that you learn in boot camp somewhere? Like doing push-ups is going to make you a better leader?
not in the Marine Corps. Like I don't know. I don't know how to say that any other way. Like I didn't learn how to lead uh being physically fit. Like I learned how to lead by having like my sergeant come in and talk to me about my fit rep. And when I got promoted, somebody sat me down and was like, hey, this is how a fit rep goes, and this is what the top block means, and this is where you want to be. And then I did that to my Marines, and I taught them about like leadership values and JJJ did tie buckle, and we have all these acronyms, right? That's where I learned to lead. Was it important for me to be physically fit? Yeah. Like I'm not going to be a very good leader if I'm the weakest person there, the slowest person there. But then I kind of reached that point as a platoon sergeant where it's like I don't need to be the best person here anymore. It's okay. I can like I can slow down a little bit and then really help the other soldiers or other Marines develop. I know that that's probably not something people want to hear, but it's the truth. Like
Alex, what's the Army answer? You've been to the physical
I
training
mean, there's the
school.
me answer and then there's the army answer, and they're not necessarily the same thing. So I'll hit a few bullet points here, and then I'll shelve this one for a future conversation because I know we're coming back to it. In the army, typically, and like there's not supposed to be things that are just officer business and things that are just NCO business, but PRT is very much treated as something that's NCO business in the army. I was a junior officer who really enjoyed being involved in PT, wanted PT to be good. It was often the most fun part of my day. So I was like probably more involved in it than other people necessarily like. That said, still loved like it was still going to be run by NCOs at the end of the day. Like I might give them guidance on like what we were going to try and do, or maybe run an example one every now and then. But like as a as a lieutenant is when I first got exposed to actual human performance professionals, like Mark Taysom's tactical athlete program. Seeing that is probably why I'm doing the work I'm doing now. So I have slightly different ideas about it. I think that leading PT sessions is an opportunity to get leadership experience in front of people and like do something and coordinate it and have some logistics to it and have some adjusting to conditions and making sure you have a good plan and all that stuff. But it's only one of many opportunities to do it. And if it's the only place people are getting it, then something's much more foundationally wrong with the organization because you should be getting more of that in training than you are in PT. All that said, I know not everybody agrees with me, and there are lots of good leaders that have a different opinion about what the point of PT sessions in the morning is and building culture and stuff. And I know where we're going to revisit this one. We talked about Sean Robertson during the General Gilland episode. I had a phone call with Sean last week to talk about it. He has a little frustrated. He wants to fight me a little bit, and that's good because that's who Sean is. Sean is very much on the side of PT is about building cohesive teams, and he wants to have that fight when he comes on the podcast. So
Ooh, joy.
we will to be continued.
TBD.
I think no, I think you
TBC.
made an interesting point. I, I will, in the context of how you said it, right? If we say that PT is the only opportunity for junior leaders to be developed, then that's fundamentally wrong
Yeah.
because you get a lot more like, hey, I want you to plan a mission. You're going to patrol to the end to Burger King and back. Like you're going to get a lot more leadership there, right? Or like, hey, I want you to go like we used to do patrols throughout Marine Corps Base Hawaii because it's not a big base, but literally we're like running ambushes on each other in the middle of like housing because there's just no areas. But like that's really where we kind of learn to do the thing. But if it's in a vacuum and PRT is the only place you're saying leadership is developed, all right, that's like it's not good.
Yeah, we got problems. Moving from that to the next step, because we talked about coaches coaching, but we do know that in the tactical space, coaches are not always going to be there for every session, right? It's not you're not booking the strength and conditioning facility 3 to 4 days a week and then rotating them through. You're going to be there maybe once a week, possibly at best. It might be less than that. Maybe you're in a small unit, it's a little more than that. Maybe you're well resourced, whatever. We would hope that exposure to human performance staff helps them improve the physical training they're doing, even when coaches aren't around. And that brings us to the conversation of extender courses and whatever we want to call it. Marine Corps calls them force fitness instructors. Army calls them master fitness trainers, or now I think we're supposed to call them H2F integrators. There's all these things where we like send somebody to a couple weeks of class and bestow upon them a certificate and congrats, you're an expert, go lead. I'm curious what your perspective is on that, how effective you think that is. I've talked about my opinions on this on the podcast before, but I'm curious what your perspective is on it.
Yeah, I remember when I did the Marine Corps martial arts instructor course. It's 3 weeks. It's called the AKA the Green Belt course, Green Belt instructor course. I didn't have any martial arts experience, right? And so you learn techniques and you learn how to choke somebody out. And at the end, you're like a martial arts instructor after 3 weeks. But then there's like an inside joke in the combat instructor community where it's like, hey, congratulations, you now know enough to get your butt really kicked. Like, like that's what you know, right? And then you realize, oh, this takes practice, and like I'm not a proficient at this, even though the Marine Corps may say I'm like this instructor and I can now teach Marines. I'm not anywhere near an expert on this, and I think that's important. So I find extender courses extremely valuable. I find them extremely valuable because it is a great place to get buy-in, right? It's a great place. I'm not going to make you an expert in 2 weeks, especially if we're trying to do like an H2F curriculum where like everybody's coming up there to talk. And like we just recently had a graduation. I kind of told them like every expert here probably did like 6 years or more of college to become an expert in their given domain. So we just gave you 2 weeks of all the domains. You're definitely not an expert. But there's a few things, right? The first thing that I love about extended courses is soldiers can receive instruction from really passionate people. And I think by doing that, you build buy-in, right? Like if somebody comes in and they're and like we practice our presentations in front of each other and we make sure that like we got good energy and we make sure that the slides look good, right? And we want that soldier to be impressed by the presentation first and foremost. And then hopefully be like, wow, like they really care about their job. That's like number one. And then number two is just hopefully getting our like hooks in them actually wanting to learn more about H2F, wanting to learn more about like strength and conditioning or sleep or nutrition or whatever they really liked. And then the last thing is like now they know where the resources are, like bring your soldiers to us. Triage them if you can get somebody to like stop eating chicken wings because they're on ABCP, cool. But if there's something deeper, like you're not telling somebody to go the keto diet, you're not telling somebody to be carnivore. You're saying, I know an expert and I'm going to take you to that expert and I'm going to walk you over there. And I think at the end of the day, like those are the really big takeaways from extended courses. We're educating leaders to be on our side, really, to understand us a little bit more.
So you made me think of two things. One, I just want to lay one out for the audience, and who knows if I'll get in trouble for this because this is straying into work territory a little bit. Um, when I was teaching Master Fitness Trainer, which has evolved to be H2FI now, the requirement to be an instructor was, other than internal instructor training that happened at the schoolhouse, the requirement was you had to get a TSEC certification. Um, People in the industry are probably aware that that's a relatively low bar, not a very hard test to pass. Don't need a ton of study, even if you don't have a background in this. If you had a CSCS at the school, you were considered like the best of the best in terms of being an instructor. And despite what some people in the Army may think, CSCS is an entry level certification. It's the certification people in the strength and conditioning space get to start learning, like to start getting experience on the job. I would need people to hear that. It's not the pinnacle, it is not the culmination, it is the beginning. It is very literally an entry level certification. And I remember, like, I didn't get my CSCS until towards the end of my time being an instructor at the schoolhouse. And I thought I'd achieved something huge. And this was like a super cool thing and a really big deal. And part of why I do this podcast with Drew is because something Drew did for me was like knock me down a couple pegs right after I got it. Like, hey man, congrats on that certification. Everything you learned is at least a decade out of date. Now it's time to realize what was bullshit and what was useful.
Oh,
Here we
with
go.
me.
And and so that brings me back to like the levels of expertise and what your real goal is. And like in the program I work in my day job now, we sat down for a while and talked about like what is the output we want. If we're going to run a course and make people come hang out with us for a few days or a week or 2 weeks or whatever it ends up being, what do we want them to graduate being able to do and knowing? And I think a lot of people massively overestimate how much you can teach somebody with no background in this space in a week or two. And I think we try to be really realistic about it. Our goal, I mean, one is they should graduate just knowing who we are and what we can offer them better than they did when they arrived. But like most foundationally, we just want them to be ambassadors for our program. Like when you graduate, we don't expect you to be an expert. We don't expect you to necessarily run everything or be super knowledgeable on all these topics. But we do expect you to care about these things a little more and recognize when somebody needs to come see us, or recognizing when you need to like talk to us about running a class or something. Just be out there in the units as an ambassador for the human performance program so that you can like help us get to where we need to be. Once again, not a question, but I really liked what you said about just like
Yeah, you said it way
that
better than I did. You're so much more eloquently, like, like so much better. But yeah, no, I totally that's exactly what you want. You want them to be ambassadors, and you want them to be like, hey, those H2F guys, it's like they know what they're talking about, and they really like what they do. And I think that that's I don't know, for me, when you're around somebody who really enjoys what they do, like you want to be that person and you want to learn more from that person. So, you know, um, yeah, I think it's great. I do agree with Drew that it's an entry level. I got my CSES because I was trying to get into like government contracting, right? I literally just walked in, like I had some like printout. It wasn't even the official NSCA like study guide. I studied it for one day, took the test the next day, and passed, right? I just finished my master's degree in kinesiology. So like I had the crash course. Um, but I've also been taught when I was an undergrad, and this is maybe just kind of like uh maybe it's just like I'm scratching the itch like Drew does most with it. It's like I'm in a lab in my undergrad, and we're learning about strength and conditioning, and they ask us, hey, I want you to write a 1 week example microcycle for strength for a football player. I was interning with the University of Houston at the time. All I did was like walk over. It's like, hey, coach, I'm just going to borrow this real quick. And like that's what I turned in. I had that TA, she put it up and she's like, this would never work. This doesn't make sense.
God.
I am a CSCS,
You're giving me
right?
flashbacks, man.
And I'm like, it's literally across the street what we're doing on a daily basis. So like, and that internship was like, that was a boot camp because like in school, we're like learning, book stuff. And then in the internship, I'm learning the science and practice of sport. Like we're reading Russian stuff more than we're reading like the NSCA stuff. And I think that was a really great start for me to like at least acknowledge that one train of thought isn't the only way to go about things for strength conditioning.
Drew
Yeah,
loves dead Russians.
I don't. I think I may have said this on this podcast before, but I mean, I loved my graduate program, probably more so because it was in Scotland and less because the curriculum itself was like earth-shattering. But to your point exactly, I learned more from the old Shrek-looking Scottish weightlifter guy that ran the Olympic gym downstairs than I did from like the PhD talking about heat exhaustion. And it's funny because like there were, I don't know, 15, 20 of us on the program, and like they all graduated. We all got the same degree, but only four of us worked out consistently in that gym downstairs. And we will always look at his name was Spencer, could hardly understand a word he said, uh, but shaped way more of my understanding of how to train human beings than any of the books that I read, which leads me, interestingly enough, to the next question I wanted to ask you. And I pulled this from one of your LinkedIn posts. I won't read it word for word, but you sort of went through a couple of key points about the ideal candidate for tactical human performance. You mentioned learning more about programming from concurrent training versus some of the linear stuff you had in school, professional delivery from Marine Corps martial arts as opposed to public speaking classes. Like, there's a couple of different things. And I'm just curious to hear now you've been in the seat for a number of years. When you think about the ideal candidate for, let's call it a tactical strength and conditioning job, like what are you looking for?
I think I think somebody who I've said this before. I see a lot more success. This is just observing different coaches. I've seen a lot more successful coaches come from the private space than they do from the collegiate space. And I think because there's a lot more people building and like relationship building in the private space. Um, so that's not to say that you can't be successful out of collegiate side. It's just to say that you have to be open to different ways of training. You have to just kind of like break down the barriers. Like okay, so I started in training when I was in the Marine Corps martial arts program. We actually called it, so I've been talking about like strength and conditioning since I was like 2000, since 2006, because the martial arts curriculum has fitness embedded within it. And so that was all linear stuff. And then graduate, go do the internship, start they're doing like APRE one day, and then like 2 weeks later, they're switching it up, and then they're doing speed stuff. And then, my mentor at the time, he's like, "Hey, you need to read this Brian Mann stuff." Like he read what he's doing. And really what I got out of that is I started reading a bunch of different coaches. And and I and when I talk to coaches in the tactical space, I just tell them you can't be dogmatic. Like if you're gonna die on a sword, you're gonna be unsuccessful because you're gonna have to be able to pick the right tool for that population you're working with or that unit you're working with. Because some of them may really like, hey, like maybe you like throw some conjugate training at them and they're doing like heavy lifts one day and then doing speed work and they're bought into that. So you need to know a little bit about that, but maybe some other, so, to throw out Brian McKenzie because you threw that, like maybe you're doing some speed, power, endurance stuff because they really like that stuff. And then like just having all those tools in your toolbox is understanding them. And to your point about like graduate school is boring, but then having that underlying understanding of physiology to at least like let you know like, hey, here's the secret in strength and conditioning. Everything works. Like
Mhm.
everything works. Doesn't matter. Like you could have CrossFit guy and you could have what's that new endurance sport that they do where it's literally the same like
Oh,
race.
high rocks,
High rocks. There it
high
is.
Or you
rocks.
can have a high rocks coach and they're probably going to have success, and the CrossFit coach is going to have success, and the guy who's doing college, strength and conditioning, he came from a rugby team and he's doing a lot of the same things. He's probably going to have success, and it all works. It's really what that unit likes to do.
And if they like you.
Mm.
and if they like you. Yeah. Oh,
Man,
we did like an H2F summit for Fort Bliss, and they brought in a really great speaker. He was like a CEO, he's like a executive coach type guy. And like the first thing he said, he's like, if you're gonna be a leader, the first thing you need to understand is that you need to be likable. Like
Hmm.
you need to be likable. So
a lot of military leaders in the room might have taken that one the wrong way.
I
That's
think,
true.
yeah, I can see that, but
I
I
think there's a
definitely
misconception that just because the soldiers are ordered to like you doesn't mean that they actually do.
I think there's like likable because you're fair and transparent and like you don't really like have these mood swings. And
Yeah.
then there's likable because you're like a cool, fun guy, or girl. I think there's a difference there, but
Hmm.
I was I was probably not the most likable coach, and I'll admit that. I'm probably more likable as a director.
That's awesome. You're a nice guy.
So we're bumping up against the hour mark here. Actually, I think we're technically over the hour mark. And we had, like we said, not a lot of planning went into this one, but we had some ideas what we wanted to talk about. You listen to a few of our episodes, you know, kind of the things we talk about. We've chatted before offline. What have we not talked about here that you think this audience would benefit from hearing or that you're constantly thinking about and wish you had a platform to get out there in people's ears?
Yeah, the biggest thing, and I did the presentation at TSAC kind of about it, is the biggest thing is that in the tactical space, we think that we think the most important thing is getting the X's and O's of human performance down. Everybody knows what they're doing, right? What you need to learn, what we don't talk about is like, what is the senior enlisted relationship with the commander, and how does that work? And how do I navigate that relationship as somebody in my position coming in from the collegiate space if I have no idea how the military works? Like what are different ways to put together like different training? I was kind of just watching some coach put together training for a unit, and this dude like it blew me away because at first sight I was like, no, that's crazy, like like GTM role. But then I was like thinking about it, I was like, that's actually really smart, where the coach is programming things that he wrote and then programming external MWR resources into that program, right?
Hmm.
And at first, like for when you first look at it, you're like, well, that's not doing your job. You're not doing your job. It's exactly what he should be doing is utilizing the resources available to him to get training for the soldiers in the best method possible. We have like this mission essential fitness on Fort Bliss, and it's been around forever, and it's just like this long circuit. And at face, like even I was kind of like, oh, this is stupid. This is stupid, right? But if the soldiers love doing it, why not just like, right? So like those are the things we're not really talking about. I love talking about the physiology. I love talking about the strength and conditioning stuff. Um, but some of the things that we're lacking to help people become really successful is like, all right, you know how to do your job. How do you integrate? What's the integration look like? So yeah, I think those are kind of that's the big thing.
You're scratching at some topics that I've been thinking about a bunch recently again. It comes back to what Drew said about like part of this is human performance professionals changing the culture of the military, but just as big a part of this is the military changing the culture of human performance. And and two things come to mind. One, I think there are a lot of coaches who like really truly believe that they were hired to turn tactical professionals into either football players or powerlifters. And I don't think that's what this is supposed to be. Like that's like
Dude, there's so
introducing them to
many of
some
those
like
guys,
strength training stuff is
and they
part of
all
this.
have they all have their own Instagram, some dumb logo, and they're
I'm
posting
gonna get yelled at
videos.
about this later. People are gonna be
Just
mad.
just
But
stop.
the other piece that gets me, I don't know, worried, concerned, and Drew and I've talked about this. I'm not sure if it was on the podcast or not, but you go to like NSCA tactical, and we're talking primarily like there's police stuff and there's firefighter stuff for sure. but the bulk of the conversations tend to be around human performance for the military. And there are not very many members of the military walking around. There are tons of members of the military who have a huge interest in this, who are leading programs, who are involved in programs, and they're not really there, and they're not really part of the conversation. Like we end up like Drew gets heated about it all the time, but we end up talking about energy
I'm
systems.
getting quoted a lot in this episode. I'm enjoying this.
But he's right. Like look at the agenda for the conference and how many of the presentations are about like how you should leverage energy systems in your programming. You know what I mean? Like it's every year,
Stop
multiple
having that
presentations per year.
conversation.
And like instead, maybe we could have like a coach and a sergeant major sit up there and just like have a conversation that people need to hear them have, or like a brigade commander, brigade sergeant major, battalion commander, battalion sergeant major, like a bunch of different echelons talk through like what the priorities are at their level and what they care about and what they need to see for return on investment and like what they can allow and what they can't allow, and this whole tension between coaches coaching versus coaches teaching NCOs. Like get the people who have the authority to make those decisions in the room, because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, the decisions aren't made by coaches.
Here's an idea for the NSCA. I know they're listening. Um, why doesn't the tactical conference have a certain number of scholarships that they could award to the different embedded human performance
Mm-hmm.
teams to then award to soldiers, sailors, Marines who have performed well within the context of their organizations? Like if it weren't such a big money grab and they kept trying to charge coaches more money to go to this thing, like there's real opportunity because inevitably, and this isn't even just H2F, like you will have teams of CSCS people across the military. The NSCA could easily call somebody like me and be like, hey, we have a ticket to the thing. Whoever you think is the best soldier to come on behalf of your organization, send them. Like, I think that'd be pretty cool. And then, because what you're talking about is effectively a debate. I don't know if many people in human performance know what a debate is, but if you go online, Oxford, Cambridge, there's some really interesting debates. We could have like a senior enlisted and a coach have a debate about what we think about PT as a leadership tool. I mean, I think it'd be interesting. It'll never happen, but there's my
No, I
idea.
think that's a great idea. Like you guys were talking about that. I think, I don't know. I've like just digested so much. Your voices are in my
You've
head.
been mopping it up.
And
See there? That was good.
I was definitely thinking about like, okay, like how do I get like, all right, let's take like take some of our, we call them facilitators, let's take them with us next time, right? And so they can experience it, the top ones. And I mean, I became a strength coach because of my exposure to strength and conditioning in the military. That's what I wanted to do. Like I knew that's what I wanted to do when I got out. Um, and essentially we're building the next generation of coaches that will come in and help the military. But I will say, like, it's the third year this year that we did a Forkless H2F summit, and that's exactly what we did. For 3 years in a row, one of my senior leaders got up and talked about how they utilize their H2F and how they organize it and what the priorities of work that they give their subject matter expert are, and then what they expect, what kind of metrics they expect in return from their coaches and their athletic trainers. And time again, like each year, right? Like we could do the AAR. Everybody's like, that was the best. That was the best presentation. It told me exactly how to run, how to use H2F. I
Hmm.
think, like, dude, I know sleep is good for you. Like, like, I know that my nutrition is important, and monsters are like neurotoxic, but they taste good. So like, you got
Hmm.
to take here. Um,
But you got to learn
so
the latest tactical agility drills, man.
yeah, so I think that would be great. Like even make it like a like a separate category. Like, hey, every NSCA tactical annual, was it tactical annual training?
Training. Yep.
Well,
Do we know why it's called Tycho? Like if the audience doesn't know, the whole thing is the DoD has really strict travel policies on conferences. And just to be clear, regardless of what the name of the event is, if it meets the definition of a conference, it's a conference. It doesn't have to have conference in the name. Play whatever games you want with that. It's
That's why we've
fine.
seen a lot of symposiums pop up
But
lately.
but they purposely removed conference from the name and moved training to the name because training is a different category on DTS and there's no extra approvals if it's training. Yeah, cheesy, whatever.
See, and when people say the answer is no to so many things, that's a great example of the fact that we've made these rules up ourselves. You can just change them and it's totally fine.
I'm not advocating for people to hide the fact that they're attending a conference. Let me make that totally
If you
clear.
want to learn how, though, we have our email information on our website.
I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure
Um,
it is.
I think like you said, we made up the rules to that, right? And to go back to your thing about strength and conditioning, we made up the rules to that, and we can change that. Like nobody, like you don't have to do it the same way everybody does it.
So true.
Mm.
Yeah. I think of Cal Dietz when I think of that. Like when I hear him talk, he's like, I started doing it because I just started doing it and it was working. And I'm like, oh, why can't I be like that? All right, I'm gonna be like that.
Jeez. Well, we've kept you too long, but as Alex said, this conversation was long overdue, and I'm sure it won't be the last. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for chatting with us.
No, I appreciate it, guys. Hopefully people like it. I know I'm like the least what's a good word? Accomplished
Oh,
podcast.
please.
Absolutely not.
Alex and I are on here. We've set a very low bar. Hey guys, welcome to the tail end. Maybe we should call it the tail end from now on.
We could use the same phrase for the after the episode stuff as we use for the newsletter
Mopping it up.
because it kind of works.
Let's mop it up.
The mop up, yeah.
Here's the mop up.
That was a shameless plug. We're getting a newsletter going. I know some of you may have received newsletters from me months and months ago, and then it disappeared. But we're reactivating the newsletter.
Well, you've committed a sin there because this is going to come out 2 weeks from now. At which point the newsletter will have already gone out. The first one.
Yeah. Well, now it's committed.
It's
so
scheduled to
by the
come
time
out.
you were hearing this, you should have received the newsletter. If you don't have the newsletter, that means you're not on our email list, which means you should go to our website, go to the bottom, punch in your email. You'll get the future newsletters.
Mm-hmm. But no, I think like you mentioned at the top, Ray has been in this space for a long time, and he has a lot of hot takes, a lot of really good thoughts on it. And so we intentionally did not structure this episode the way we normally do. There weren't a list of questions. We just had thrown some ideas out onto the document that we use, and we wanted to just see where it went. And I think certainly his experience as a Marine, and I would even go so far as to say his experience as an enlisted Marine in an infantry position, I think gives him an incredibly unique perspective of like what's actually important and then what's bullshit. And I think his takes on what is bullshit seem to sync well with a lot of other takes we've gotten about the same sort of thing. So, I don't know what we end up doing with all that, but it seems like a lot of people are saying a lot of the same things.
I'm not sure if there was even anything in this episode that it was like the first time we've talked about it. I just think that Ray always chimes in on the conversations I think are important. He's not getting in fights over X's and O's stuff. He's having real conversations about the culture issues, the dynamics that actually limit effectiveness of programs and how to overcome some of those challenges. And I've just always appreciated his thoughts on stuff. I was not exaggerating when I said earlier in the episode that like it's been years now of me sending Ray notes of like, we should really talk about it in the podcast. Glad we finally got to it because a lot of these are themes that you're going to keep hearing from us. And I think Ray does a good job staying focused on the things that actually matter.
Yeah. And for the coaches, I know this will be not news if you've listened to us before, but I don't know how many times it needs to be said that like, I think the real way to handle this tactical thing is to just be like anti-dogmatic. And Ray spoke to that quite a bit in a couple different capacities. But if you're still just opening a textbook and thinking that's the right answer and then getting pissed off when it doesn't work and blaming soldiers and sailors and Marines, then like I don't know what to say. Like, just do better.
Like for some reason, it feels hard to have some of these conversations sometimes. Like we talk about the wrong things. hopefully we're moving the needle on it a little bit. That's all I really hope for with this podcast, but I think this was a step in that direction.
So yeah, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next week. Hey Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.